Today we're speaking with Michael Lazerow, whose startup Buddy Media was acquired by Salesforce.com for $800 million. Let's go chat with him. Thanks everybody for coming out here. Thank you to Michael Lazerow for coming out here to visit us. He's in town for 43 North. He's going to be the judge over there. We're going to get into his story, but Michael has been a pretty successful entrepreneur. He's currently the Chief Strategy Officer at Salesforce. He started a company called Buddy Media, sold it for $800 million roughly to Salesforce. So we're here to kind of learn from him today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It is on.
Okay, great.
It's so loud, I'm trying not to talk too closely to it. Then it gets really loud. So we'll keep it right here.
Okay, so yeah, just starting from the beginning, where did you grow up?
Yeah. So I'm no longer at Salesforce. I was there 3 years, great company. Still a stockholder, love the company, but after 3 years decided it was time to move on. And but to answer your question, I'm from the Washington, D.C. area. Did not grow up around technology. So, parents were kind of entrepreneurs and public interest lobbyists. So my mom is a leadership conference on civil rights and very involved with gay rights and women's issues, and as I joke, would represent everyone but me. And so this was a foreign world, and had a relatively normal childhood.
So you ended up going to Northwestern for journalism. How did that come about? What was that interest?
Yeah, so I went to Northwestern because it's the only school I got into, which is true story. I wasn't good at testing and didn't test well, applied to a bunch of schools. My so-called safety schools didn't agree that they were safety schools. And luckily Northwestern, you apply to the individual school, and they have a journalism school. I'd worked for the high school newspaper and had some writing samples, and so that was kind of my back door into Northwestern. There's probably no other way I could have gotten into Northwestern. I never visited the school, didn't know much about the Midwest. I thought it was in the Northwest, right? Northwestern. And it turns out it's in Chicago, outside Chicago, which was good coming from DC. So it was easier to get to. And, but I loved it and went through the journalism school assuming that I'd be a journalist. Every summer I'd intern. I kind of had some entrepreneurial things going on in college, but I would intern in the summers, writing. So I'd write for Roll Call, which is a newspaper at Capitol Hill, with Mort Kondracki, who used to be on the McLaughlin Group, for those of us my age in the room. Was doing that until, with timing's kind of everything. And, around 1994, we really saw the commercialization of this thing called the internet. And I was just hit very hard by that and thought it was going to be big. There were only 13 million people on the internet at the time. Most of them were university, related. We had to actually go into the, computer lab at Northwestern to access the internet, or go to the library and, type in like your email stuff, which was not like it is today. It was like mlaz at ACNS 12446 Medill 221.nw.edu, just to see that no one emailed you. So it'd take 15 minutes to log in just to see, oh, no email, darn. So now it takes a second to check that everyone emailed you, which is also less exciting than that. And really timing is everything, and the internet took off. So it's either I make $13,000 as a reporter for the Delaware State News covering the chicken industry, which is big in Delaware. It's big everywhere. You guys have chicken here, I'm sure. Or make zero, continuing with some of my entrepreneurial things, not knowing there's really any real money anytime soon in the internet, but it seemed, I was just interested in it.
So it seems like maybe the first thing was this university wire that you started. Tell me about that. Like, what was that? Where did the idea come from?
Yeah, it was a very simple idea. I wrote for the Daily Northwestern, which was, newspaper of, the school, and we were running at the time, like 60% of our content was AP content, so Associated Press content that you could get in the Chicago Tribune or the Sun-Times or anywhere. And so I just asked a simple question, like, why are we doing this? It seems like we're a campus newspaper. Isn't there better content for students? And it turned out that there was not. The only reason we were running this content is a lot of those organizations provided it for basically free to college newspapers, hoping that you'd hook them in college and they'd go on to work at other, real publications and then buy it. And so out of that conversation with the editor-in-chief, who's now actually at the New York Times, I basically said, I'm going to start this news service that basically links the nation's college newspapers into our own Associated Press-like service. So if you're at the Michigan campus, the Michigan Daily is awesome, right? Like their coverage of the football team is the best. If anything really happens at Michigan, they kind of cover it the best. And it's at a time where you think of like Title IX and a lot of the kind of national news is coming out of universities. And so the idea that we could like harness the campus paper as like a local bureau for a national news service just took off among college newspapers as a project, not necessarily as a company. And then once it was a project that needed to hire people, and then those people wanted to get paid, because that's what people do. Even back then, they'd want to get paid, unfortunately. And I was like, I don't know how to pay them, let's just figure out how to make money. And so that's when it turned into a business.
Okay. And then, so what happened after that? What happened to that business? It seems like golf.com is this maybe the next
Yeah, so that
chapter,
business became a much larger business. So it started with this news idea and turned into websites, and we merged it with a company called Student Advantage, which was about 6 people at the time. I don't know everyone have Student Advantage cards? So it was a student discount card. And we got the company to about 100 million in sales. We took it public. Didn't quite know what that meant. We raised 60 million on a $300 million valuation, which is basically like a Series A these days out west. And it probably should have never been worth $2 billion, which it was at its peak. But it also, shouldn't have been worth what it was taken private at, I didn't think. But great company, great experience. Left that to basically pursue a thesis in the web, which was traffic's going to move away from these massive portals. You had not only Yahoo and Excite and a company called Ep.1, which seems like a bad idea now, which basically let's just incentivize people to use our search engines and they could win like lottery type things. Like, and they get points for every search, but they had like 10 million people, which used to be like 1 billion people. Now everyone has 1 billion people. But 10 million when there are only like 50 million people on the internet's pretty big. And then, I'm basically, let's start doing these niche sites. And so let's do like golf and food and wine and health and fitness. We never got out of golf. Turns out that, Tiger Woods was just taking off. So he just won his first Masters, the one he won by like 12 strokes. And so we rode the whole Tiger Woods thing in golf. We bought golf.com. We kind of were doing, it was an ad business, and basically whenever Tiger or Phil or some of those guys signed a sponsorship, we'd like go to them and say, hey, like I know you just signed this Buick, you should advertise it with us. And so grew that and sold it to Time Inc. In 2005, which was a great deal, small deal, it was a $25 million deal. But part of that deal was moving to New York with my wife, Cass, and at that time, 2 young kids, a 4-year-old and a 1.5-year-old, which we wanted to do, but it was kind of accelerated by the Time Inc. deal.
Okay. So now what's next after golf.com then? Lazerow Consulting, Buddy Media?
Yeah, so, I liked, Time Inc. to me was an interesting year because the company was going through a lot of changes. So we're talking about like 05, 06, and you start to see really the first big exodus of subscribers. So these, especially in the men's side, Sports Illustrated, Golf Magazine, you had, you see that their armor is starting to get cracked. But at the same time, I grew up reading Time Magazine and Sports Illustrated, and we used to fight over Sports Illustrated, right, when it showed up at the house. Now you could stand outside and say, hey, who wants Sports Illustrated? People are like, what's this, are you homeless? Like, what's going on here, right? So you can't give them away. And so I was just kind of amazed at like how this great institution worked. And so it was and it was the first time I'd been at a real company. And so, I spent the year running the basic Golf Magazine and Sports Illustrated's online golf properties, and was doing some consulting stuff. And we're now pregnant again, my wife with our third, and the day she gave birth was the day Facebook launched their platform, which basically Zuck got up at F8, and I was an early user of Facebook just because I was in the student market at Student Advantage, and I would use every student product that came out. I wish we would have started Facebook, but it probably wouldn't have worked, way back when. But basically, I was blown away because I saw it as this huge opening of the internet where, for those not familiar with the Facebook platform, Zuck got up and said, anyone, and he only had 20 million users at the time, which is kind of crazy. As I think back of it, I'm like, what was I thinking? But he said, any developer can build an application on top of Facebook for free. You can use basically the same tools that we use to build our applications. Users can add it to their profile. People used to do that, like add apps to their profile. And we just started building apps and partnering. We ended up buying a small little app development shop. And that turned into kind of just, we were knee deep in the Facebook ecosystem. When I was first meeting with Facebook, they had 200 employees. They were downtown Palo Alto. They were not the Facebook. You'd walk in and it kind of smelled. It's like, wow, this is either going to flame out or it's going to be massive. It felt like it was going to be massive because how they connected you to, not necessarily friends, because I didn't have any real friends on it, but to other people was key. It was just like a powerful way to connect with people. And everyone who I did introduce it to and who was on it just like stuck on it. Like they lived on it. They never were without it. It wasn't one of these apps that you use and then abandon. They have, what other company other than like Google and maybe a few others that have like 100% retention, right? Every now and then you read a story that like someone canceled their Facebook account, right? But then they get tagged for a birthday party or a picture. They're like, oh, I gotta sign up again. And so we just, honestly, we picked a really good market, which was social media. We picked the best platform. We could have done Twitter. We could have done MySpace or some of the others, which were much bigger. MySpace was, and LinkedIn for the record, not Twitter at the time. And it was basically, let's just figure out where this is all going and hopefully be a part of it. It was really more being part of a movement, not necessarily like this is the exact business that we're going to do, because we pivoted, every Wednesday basically.
So it was just basically learning the platform. What you guys just started like spitballing ideas as to what you could do. I think I read that you guys did some games at one point.
Yeah, we did some ideas that probably some of the worst ideas in the history of humanity. And we didn't really think, we just started building and doing it. So I started the company with the idea that Facebook's going to be big. I started with my wife, Cass. We've done these companies together. And people we respected were getting into the space. So one of the board members who I was meeting with is Peter Thiel, and he's like, I'll give you like $500,000, which doesn't really happen. Like, it was kind of weird that he even did that, because I didn't know him that well. And then, I'm spending a lot of time with Mark Pincus from Zynga. It's called Presidio Media. My company, Buddy Media, actually, I think was the first advertiser ever on, Zynga. He happened to be in New York, also unemployed, because his girlfriend, now wife, was still working at Hachette. She went on to start, One King's Lane, is just a phenomenal entrepreneur herself. And, people I just thought were smart were like really investing in this platform. And so, we raised, I think, 1.8 million, Mark and Peter and, a bunch of people were in this round. Like, I hadn't talked to Jordy or anyone from Buffalo yet. That's going to be like 8 months later, probably. And we started with this thing called Ace Bucks, which you play games, you earn points. You could then use those points to redeem it for like real stuff. Alan Patrikoff, who was one of our first investors, says, it's just like green stamps, like 1891. I'm like, yes, it's exactly what we're modeling it off of. And he invested, which he shouldn't have, but it turned out to be okay. Problem with Ace Bucks is like they weren't worth anything, and I'm not an economist, so the idea of like inflation never crossed my mind. So just give more Ace Bucks. And so we have, at one point, like 1 trillion Ace Bucks out with like total prizes valued at like $10,000. So you could maybe get like a 3-cent worth of stuff. And so that didn't work. We tried another game dynamic, which didn't work. We then started meeting with, we had a bunch of games, we bought games. So you guys probably played like ninjas versus pirates and zombies versus werewolves. We thought those were gonna be the future, so we bought those and hired some of those people. And we'd go talk to brands, we'd be like, you gotta be on Facebook. We have a way for you to advertise in our games. And they'd be like, well, what's Facebook? And, why would I advertise there? Like, maybe I need my own page or my own application. Pages weren't around. So we started building custom applications. So I went to Time Inc. and I'm like, InStyle, you need this, Hollywood hair makeover, where you upload your picture to Facebook and you put like different Hollywood star hair on your head and then send it out to your friends. We did like the FedEx launch a package where it's like a virtual, instead of getting like an email, you get a virtual FedEx. Another bad idea. But it put us in a position to have brand relationships. And when Facebook launched its page product, we, at the same time, launched a page management system, which turned into a SaaS company, which really, the 3 years that we actually did that, that's how we got to 40 million in revenue and put us in a position to, we thought take the company public or continue to grow, but we ended up selling for a bunch of different reasons.
Now, is that something where you're with the board, you're doing all these different things, FedEx, et cetera, and then you're thinking, we need to productize this?
Yeah, I mean, each of the apps that we were building had the same functionality. It was a combination of like tagging and sending, and there were probably 10 different actions. So in one app, a send could have been like a message, another one it could have been a FedEx, another one it could have been like check out my hair. And so we created a modular system with drag and drop components where you could just build Facebook apps in a matter of minutes. And then we did it as part of the page setup, because the world was, at this time, everyone's like, I don't need a website. I just need a Facebook page. And you'd go, like the Super Bowl you started to see facebook.com/Pepsi, right? Like, you don't need a website, you need a distributed network of, Twitter, and this was like 2010 at this point, Twitter and YouTube and whatever the social network at the time was. And we helped do that. So we helped create that movement. We raised a lot of money to advertise and to kind of create this space. And Facebook would send us a lot of their customers, like, because they wanted to sell ads. They'd be, oh, go talk to Buddy Media. They'll get you set up with a page. They'll do what you need to do to get set up, and then come spend money with us. And so we were kind of, married to Facebook, even as a third-party developer.
Were there any like trying times there where the bank account was getting a little short? They talk about deploying cash, like being aggressive with it and hiring as many people as you possibly can because you're going through this crazy shift versus being conservative.
The interesting thing about that business is I'm constantly stressed out when I'm running companies and doing startups. It's just not healthy. I gain weight. I fight with my wife, even though we work together. Like, it's just a miserable experience. Maybe some entrepreneurs know what I'm talking about, where it's like, it's all you think about, it's all you do, you start hating it, like, you have like highs and lows, and it's just, so that was always there, because we're like, oh man, this isn't working, we gotta pivot, we gotta do this, we hire the wrong people, we don't, it's just, it gets ugly. That's a company that never had issues with money, because we raised so much. Like, we raised $90 million without a real proven business. Like, we hadn't been through multiple like renewal time frames. We hadn't, we were hiring 150 people a year without really defined jobs, which I wouldn't recommend. But it put us like at the when I went to raise money, I had a deck which was like the fastest growing software companies of all time, and it was like, it wasn't even like Microsoft and all those, like, they took like 10 years to get to 50 million in sales or something. But it would have like Salesforce and NetSuite and all these, and then Buddy Media. We're faster than Salesforce, like, and all those were like billion-dollar companies. So it helped us. I think that one slide really helped us frame the opportunity of like, whoa, this company is like the fastest company ever to get to 50 million in sales, or will be if we sell. We weren't even there. And having that money can be dangerous. We did stuff that we could have totally flamed out. We bought airport ads that some of you may have seen, like Power Your Connections. We did like taxi wraps. We would go to like South by Southwest, and like the whole airport would be wrapped. People were like sick of us, literally. But I wanted to position the company as like, you need to figure out social, and just like there's SAP and IBM and Oracle, there's Buddy Media. And people used to think, oh, we thought you were like so much bigger than you were. And that was you only do that if kind of the cost of capital is relatively cheap. Our last round of financing, we raised like 50 million on close to $500 million valuation. And so it's like, if you could raise that kind of money, like, why not go for it? And they were investing to help us go for it.
So then Buddy Media gets approached by Salesforce to be acquired?
Well, we're approached.
It sounded like there were a couple companies in the mix.
Yeah, no, we were approached by everyone over time. There were 5 that were seriously considering it around the same time. 3 of them had a lot of conviction. 2 of them I was kind of keeping up, trying to get them, to keep up with the process. And when you get approached by one company, it's like, yeah, probably not. Like, we've got enough money, we're happy, we like the space, we're engaged. You get approached by 2, and these are like big companies, like the biggest of big, and you're like, oh, you kind of have to pay attention. But then you have like 3, it's like, okay, we're selling this thing. Right? I mean, it's like, when else? And so it's like, how do we just find the right partner, for us? I think valuation like kind of takes care of itself. It's like the weather. Like, it's not great that it's like 50-mile-per-hour winds and my plane almost crashed today coming in here. But like, what can I do other than not get on the plane, right? I can't complain about the wind. Like, valuations are like that. Like, there's certain things you can do to like, put a good spin on your company, but companies will pay what they're willing to pay. Now, they'll pay a lot more they're willing to pay when like one of the biggest companies has an offer on the table that maybe is a lot higher than yours. So having like these offers on the table, and the timing was really interesting because I agreed on the deal on Wednesday, I forget the day, maybe like May 18th or 14th or something like that. And 2 days later, Facebook goes public and the stock goes down by 50%. I don't know if you remember, people are like, uh-oh, social's over. And I'm like, you know, hold those purchases that we were about to make. Like, this isn't happening. And I actually got, you know, I got a call from the acquirer, from Mark, you know, Benioff, who's like, you have nothing to worry about. You're the person, you're the company we want. We're moving forward. I'm like, this guy's the greatest dude. And he is just a great guy. Philanthropic, great vision, treats people with respect. He's really built a great organization. And I think that that's one of the key reasons we went with Salesforce, is we kind of knew we weren't going to get lost. You know, they really wanted us to help grow this marketing part of their business. And what's interesting is not only did he do our deal, but then he went out and we bought Exact Target, and we took this whole one-to-one marketing that we were trying to do on social media, right? People are no longer cookies, they're people. You know, there's someone using Facebook and you kind of know who they are. As a marketer, same with Twitter and the other ones, we took that one-to-one marketing vision across email and mobile and social and everything, and that's what's powering, if you look at the revenues of Salesforce, of the Marketing Cloud, that's why it's growing so fast, is it's a company that made a bet on the future versus what some of the others would have done is said, let's just buy what's working today. Let's buy like ad tech and retargeting and stuff that maybe had already peaked. You know, Mark spent about $3.5 billion on a marketing business that now, if you look at the financials, doing $1 billion a year, right? It took us 3 years to get it there, but it's, you know, been growing 30% a year, and it's where the world is going versus let's just buy revenues. And the genius of Salesforce is how it's been able to reinvent itself from we've all used it for Salesforce management, right? I've used it for 13 years. My whole sales team's been on it. We ran our business on it. But how it moved to the service market with the Service Cloud, helping customer service teams, and marketing, and now big data and analytics and predictive, and bigger than Amazon Web Services in the enterprise space on the platform side, and the community product. Like, very few companies create a $1 billion business. I'm confident that Salesforce today has 6 of them. Either it's happening, like it's definitely happening, or they're already there. I think 3 or 4 of them are already there. How many more can they create? And that's what's so interesting about how they've innovated as a big company.
So you started a fund. Tell me a little bit about that. You've got a $10 million fund with your wife and brother. What are you looking for?
So we run it like a fund. It's basically just us investing. So with our money. But I wanted to basically say, if we do this, I don't want to be just a drunk baby throwing money all over the place and then crying when it doesn't come back. Because I had done some investing. I found it was easier to write checks than it was to get money back. And that's the part I wanted to figure out, is how do you get money back when you invest? Because that seemed to be what I was missing. And so I'm like, let's run this as a fund. Let's have kind of a thesis, even though we knew we would kind of go outside that, which I'll talk about, and then let's structure it like a fund. And so what's happened is we've done probably too many deals, so we have been a not so drunk baby, doing a lot of deals, I think 60 companies. We look for 3 primary things, which is a product that's live. As entrepreneurs, we kind of know that you're full of shit because we're full of shit. You can't bullshit the bullshitters. Whatever you say in this spreadsheet is so stupid. It's not going to happen. And so, show me the product. You have customers. Are people coming back? So it's taken us out of the seed space, which is just investing in dreams, which is what I like as an entrepreneur, because it's so much easier to sell like the future than the present. Because the present, they're like, okay, well, show me. I'm like, well, let me tell you why we have 50% churn. Like, oh, that's going away because we have that figured out, right? And so the product that's live, we like management teams that have done other companies or at least started stuff within a company. So, we don't have a bias toward age. We do all sorts of deals, but we like people who have started other companies, even if they failed, just because you learn so much. And then third is we co-invest. So we, as a full-time employee at Salesforce, I just didn't have time to go out and do my own deals. But we had all these investors and friends who had made money who have deal flow, and so we don't go into deals unless there's a group of hopefully funds, but people who know what they're doing, who can help with the due diligence and all that stuff. And so, it's looking good. I mean, we've gotten into some great companies. We're very entrepreneur friendly. So we were fortunate enough to get into BuzzFeed, early, which I've known Jonah since the Huffington Post days, really even before the Huffington Post days. We're fortunate enough to get into Domo, which is Josh James' company, which is just valued at $2 billion. I think Jonah was 1.5 billion. So we have we invested in two of the, from that vintage of companies of when we were investing, two of the 20-some unicorns, even though I don't like that. And then we have probably 10 companies where it's happening. When I say it's happening, it's over $1 million a month in kind of what we call MRR, which is a key level. You can get to $1 million of monthly recurring revenue. So it's 12 million a year, but hopefully every month it's growing. It kind of signals that there's some sort of product market fit, or you're like baby Jesus of sales, which is fine also. If you can just sell stuff that doesn't have a market, great. It's hard to sell $12 million of that to a lot of customers. I'm not talking about just we found one customer who spends $1 million a month with us. And we're already at 2x on the money we invested, and I think as it plays out, it could be, if you compare it to other, similar sized funds, it could be one of the top in its group, which I'm pretty psyched about.
Through investing in advising companies, you've probably seen hundreds of companies. If I'm a founder listening to this talk, what do you think I'm probably doing too much of, and what do you think I'm probably not doing enough of?
So you're doing too much of everything, and that's the number one issue. Number one issue I see with all these companies, I don't sit on boards, but I'm kind of like the CEO advisor, or CEO whisperer to a lot of companies. They'll come to me, and one of my companies is about to raise close to $40 million, and there's this natural tension between the investor and the founder over the size of the option pool and a bunch of other issues. So I'm very entrepreneur friendly, but that's put me in a position of really understanding how founders operate. And pretty much everyone to a T is doing too much, they're unfocused. The typical meeting is, oh, we have this great mobile technology, and this is when I've already invested. And it's working really great here, but we got a call from blah, blah, and they want to put us in their car system, and so we're going to do that. And then, we met someone who thinks they can help us open up in Germany. And so I've sent someone over there to explore how we open the German market. And so the question I ask is what are your top 3 priorities? And usually they're well, we gotta hire this person, and we need more sales, but we also need to build this product, but we also have Germany, and so you can't even answer it. What are your top 3 priorities in order? What's number 1? Don't worry about 2 and 3. What's number 1? Very few can say it's this, and if the CEO founder can't understand and doesn't understand what the top priority is, her team doesn't know, right? If the founder can't stand up and say, this is the most important thing for our company to do to succeed, whatever it is, then imagine if you're working at that company, you don't know how your work's making a difference, you don't know if it's like rolling up to anything that's gonna matter, right? Whereas like, there are 10 things that we do every year at Salesforce, or they do, I'm no longer there. And it gets like battled out, and read Mark's Behind the Cloud book, it's called his V2 Mom process. Once we agree that number 1 is this, number 2 is this, number 3 is this, it's communicated to the whole company, and the debate about what should be prioritized is actually live streamed from the management meeting to the entire company. So if people want to know, how did we get to the decision that this year the analytics product is more important than this product? Because if you're working on the marketing cloud and all of a sudden like the analytics product is like most important, you kind of want to know that, oh, it's because like marketing data flows into it, and we think that if we own this is all hypothetical. I'm not saying it is. But you know, it lets everyone on the team know exactly where they stand. And then they say, okay, in order for us to hit company goals, here's the top, 3 things my division needs to do. Here are the top 3 things that I need to do as a manager, I need to do as a programmer, I need to do as a salesperson. So I think that, focus, like do less, cut out all the noise, both in your life and at the company, and just do more that matters and do it more intentionally. It's very easy to see a year go by because you're reactive, right? You're answering emails, you're doing other people's work, and before you know it, like you haven't moved your own company forward. So like, what do you need to do to move your company forward, and kind of like tell everyone else that, something, I'm focused on my core priorities, this isn't one of them. I have your info, I'll come back to it if it ever becomes one, but for now we're gonna pass on taking that meeting. Like every meeting you're in as a founder should be like, does this push me forward, push me back, or just leave me where I am? And just cut out the ones that you don't think are gonna matter. Like I would have, as a founder, I would never have like come to Buffalo, right? Not that I don't love Buffalo and Jordy and everything, but it just wasn't a priority for me. Now I got nothing to do, so I'm psyched to be here. My wife said she married me for better or worse, just not for lunch, so figure out like what to do. And I always like raising more money if you can. So a lot of companies are like, well, I'm oversubscribed for $1 million seat. I'm like, raise 1.5. Like you don't think you're gonna need it, but if you do need it, it's gonna be so painful. And like whatever dilution you're gonna take by taking more money is gonna potentially save you from a down round, from a cram down. And I've done it, it's not fun going to investors and being like, I'm gonna run out of money, I need you to put in more money. If they're nice, they say, yes, we'll do it at the same terms of the last round. If they're not, they're like, we'll give you another 500,000, we want 90% of the company, and you're like, that sucks. If I go out and try to raise money, these guys aren't gonna invest, and so they kind of control the company. So raise more money, you spend it like it's yours until you've so much that you can just go crazy on marketing. But that's not really a playbook I recommend, like over market. We thought that like, our whole thesis, and I have it written down from way before we sold, is the number 1 mark in this market is going to be worth X. Number 2 is going to be worth 50% of X. Number 3 will be worth 50% of that one, and then so on. And it's kind of what happened. We sold for a lot of money, and then the one beneath us sold for like 50% of a lot of money, and then so on and so forth.
So you've invested in a bunch of companies with some great results. Do you remember any instances where one of the early stage companies was either struggling or had not yet broken out, but the founders executed a maneuver that really set up the company for success?
So like, I have a few successes, but I have like dozens and dozens of crap sandwiches. So like, and frankly, those I spend so much more time with. I just had lunch with Jonah Peretti, and I told him he's like the best founder ever. Like, it's gone from like nothing to like, billions of dollars of value, he never calls me, like, I have done nothing. I felt guilty almost. Whereas other ones who I kind of know I think we're gonna lose money or all the money, I want to be there for them, and it's like painful, right? See them going through this personal struggle, which I can kind of relate to. It stresses me out. I was talking to one last night. One of their investors decided not to do part of a bridge round, and it's like it causes such stress. Like it literally stresses me out talking to them. And so typically, my advice last night, and my advice to a lot of the companies that it's not working out, is like, work on your plan B, like at the same time you're working on your plan A. So like, shame on you for not having a plan B and relying on this investor. Like whenever you're talking to an investor, like just substitute the word shark for investor. Like, oh, this is my shark, Mike. Because they're super friendly, then whenever it comes down to money, they're not that friendly, right? Because people have this weird relationship with money, even though it's either theirs or they have a fiduciary obligation. And so just know that you have a role, like to grow a company, and if you work hard and it doesn't work out, that's the system we're in. It's not like Singapore where you can never work again. And the investor, their job is to make money. Now, I think I'm a nicer investor just because I'm more of an entrepreneur. And so I usually take the entrepreneur side. If a company, I've seen this happen in other companies. I've never said we got to rip out the CEO. We've had a few that I had to convince that maybe he, and both of them, were not the ones to run the company, and which is hard with a founder CEO who's gotten raised money, and it's like your whole self-worth as an entrepreneur is tied up in this company. I'm the founder of this company, the CEO. All of a sudden you're like VP of corporate sales. It's like not good. But if you ever rip a founder out as an investor, very rarely, when you rip them out, like some investors do, I've seen, not in my companies, like it doesn't end well, right? Like if you as an investor want to run the company, great, like go run it. But like if the founder gets ripped out, assume that like everyone who's good, who they've hired, leaves. And so work on a plan B. So whether it's fundraising, whether it's products, whether it's always think about if this doesn't work out, what's my move, right? If this hire doesn't work out, like so many people are like, oh, I had my chief revenue officer and I just stopped talking to all these other candidates who went and they were hired elsewhere because I was just so focused on this candidate. Well, like that candidate wasn't focused on you and you just cost yourself 3 more months, right? And the only thing we do know at these startups is that shit goes bad every day. Like, I remember like you'd walk into the office and the news would get so bad, you just like laugh, like, I can't, okay, thank you for letting me know. What are we gonna do about it? Like, there's nothing we could do other than like move forward. The pivot's a powerful thing. So we pivoted at Buddy Media very fast to get to the business model that we basically were only in for like 3 years before we sold. So it's basically every 6 months, which is kind of how long it takes you to like build a product and test it, right? So it's hard to do it faster. And what I see with a lot of entrepreneurs is, and I'm sure with you guys, raise your hand if you've had this conversation with you. With yourself, I shouldn't have trusted my gut. My gut has gotten me into awful places. So you guys don't listen to your gut, but the other 93%, like your gut is always right? So your gut is always, like you have a gut reaction which is like, uh-oh, this isn't gonna work out. Then the next 2 weeks you talk yourself out of that position. Well, like, the market's now changing. I read this thing. I just talked to this person who thinks that we're in the right market. And we have this customer who says that they're really interested. And so you've gone from like knowing it wasn't the right thing to like convincing yourself with scientific certitude that your gut is wrong. And usually, like, at least with the entrepreneurs I've worked with, and if you really don't have a good gut, and I don't think that you guys have a bad gut, if you really have a bad gut and don't trust it, don't start companies. Like, go work in something where you don't have to use your intuition. I think there is this entrepreneurial intuition that is powered by just being so knowledgeable about a market and thinking about it 24 hours a day, and just like taking in all this information that you don't even know you're taking in, conversations and stories and data, and you don't know how you're making decisions, but you're like, I know this is right. I don't know why I know, but I know. And that's how Mark has operated. He doesn't like turn to McKinsey and say, what should be our next market? He's like, no, we have a sales software. After you sell, you kind of have to serve it. I know I can sell this through to them. Here's what we need to build. Let's go build $1 billion service market. Wow, like I've talked to a lot of customers. I think that they would use our marketing software if we had a robust solution. Like, that's where we need to go. And so you show up at Dreamforce a year later, and the Salesforce Marketing Cloud's built, right? With like the leaders in the space on stage. Like Scott Dorsey from ExactTarget, me before I became washed up. And it's such a powerful, there's an entrepreneur who is the best I've ever seen at this, out of LA, who I'm really psyched to be really involved with this company. It's called Dash Radio. I don't know if anyone's listened to Dash Radio, but it's DJ Ski. He was one of the foremost hip hop DJs on Clear Channel, national show out of LA. It's a hip hop show, a white kid from Minnesota who was flying back and forth and getting like the music from the streets, playing it in Minnesota, and people are like, I've never heard this guy named Kanye. He is awesome, right? Before Kanye's anything. And then all of a sudden people in LA are like, who is this kid? And so built this like following that's crazy. And he's not a tech entrepreneur, but he's like, something we had like terrestrial radio, which we all loved, right? Is curated and personalities we liked. We get in the car and feel comfortable. Then it went to like streaming. Well, then it went to satellite, right? So instead of just free, you have to pay for it. Then it went to streaming, which is like all algorithms, which is kind of empty. Like no one says, oh, I listen to Pandora. It's so awesome. Like those stations just rock my world, right? Because you're listening to the same songs that are just programmed to be popular. And so he's like, I'm gonna launch over-the-top radio, which is the radio we love, delivered for free over the internet. And like a year later, he has a ridiculous number of engaged listeners, over 1 million engaged listeners every month, 60 channels, and like every decision he makes is like, it's just based in gut. He didn't go to, I don't think he graduated high school, let alone college. And so and there are ways you can really learn to tune out the noise. I don't know about you guys, but I have a very noisy head. Like it's constant ideas and talk, and like, how do you just like cut out that noise, get to the signal, and really like use that? And I found that it's typically your users, like for Ski, he just knows. He knows, like he loves radio, he's an old soul. He loves radio that we grew up on, like personality-driven, curated radio. And how do you, how do you just get to the point where you're powering yourself forward using this your intuition and kind of like, tune out the thinking of like, oh, this is what others want me to do, this is what my investors want me to do, this is like we make so many decisions just based on fear. Starting with like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Like my parents are not I didn't necessarily have parents like this, but my parents like, are they're gonna be disappointed I'm not like a lawyer. Those jobs don't exist, right? And so it's like all this information you're fed that is literally makes you make bad decisions. So you have to like relearn that. Like we all are born kind of weird and happy, right? And then like childhood happens. Sit down, shut up, be like the other kids, you're graded on a curve. right? And all of a sudden you graduate wearing the same exact thing as everyone else, thinking like everyone wants you to think, and then how do we unlearn that? It's hard, really hard.
Well, we've just got a couple minutes left here. Does anybody have any questions from the audience here? You could just say it.
So, it's really hard to find right people for the startups, and I have heard that unless you have good company around you when you start your company, it's not really going to succeed. So, throughout your startup journey, how did you find right people for your startups?
So the question was, how do we, for the tape, how do you find great people for your startups? So I'm probably not the person to ask. I married the best operator ever, but she's so good at executing companies that she was able to, we complemented each other well. And so people ask, like, how do you start a company with your wife? My reaction was always, how do I not, right? Like, the founder relationship is such a hard relationship. It's like, it's harder than marriage. Like, at least when you get married, you kind of have like a common vision, hopefully. I got married very young, and still we kind of knew the life we wanted and who we wanted to become. Whereas, like, I would say the biggest reason companies go out of business, they run out of cash. So don't run out of cash. That's like the worst. If you don't have cash, no one's gonna be there. But the second is like founder issues. I see it a lot, unfortunately, and they're hard. It's a hard relationship. You spend 16 hours a day. They're same thing that goes on with marriages, right? Like, communication breaks down, and usually marriages and the relationship fall apart. You haven't practiced a lot of that before you're a founder. You have this like, oh, we're friends, let's work together, and then you hate each other. Having said that, I think the key is to find people who you trust. I don't think you have to like them necessarily, but you have to trust them. You have to have a segregation of responsibilities. So if you're a great programmer, I don't love if your co-founder is a great programmer. I would rather you have a great biz dev or sales or product person, because then you could say, okay, I'll build it, you go raise money and figure that out, and you come together. Did you do what you said you were gonna do? Yes. Part of the issues usually are like, one founder says they're gonna do something, they don't do it. Like, just do what you say you're gonna do. Like, maybe a little more if you want to be good, but so many times it's like, wait, the last meeting I had with you guys, I'm now like the mediator. You said you were going to do this. You said you did this, but what happened? Like, are you not good at that? Did you not put in the effort? And then if it's not working out, I think you just blow it up as soon as you can and say, listen, this isn't working out. Why don't you take a little of your equity and leave, or I'll leave. There's no good way to find, like, I have no formula for how to find that co-founder, but it's kind of, I was never a big dater. Like, I married the first woman who liked me, basically, which isn't a joke. It sounds like a joke, but it's true. But I imagine it's kind of like, that search for, a mate. Date before you marry, like, and I had someone who, at Buddy Media, who's a developer, who we bought his assets, and he was a great person for 10 people. As we grew, it was so obvious to us that it's just not the right environment. We're like, listen, not gonna work out. Let's just, we're not leaving, because we brought all the investors and we've done this before. So why don't we just part ways? And he got it. He's like, you're right. And he ended up doing fine. He made money on the deal. And Salesforce has 4 founders, 2 of them you know about, which you know, you would think, whoa, founder of Salesforce, how could you not know? Like Parker, Harris, and Mark are like the ones who are on stage at Dreamforce. There are two others who are great people who just, it wasn't for them being a bigger company. I wish I had more for you, but don't do it unless you're like, if your gut's like, oh, this isn't gonna work, then definitely don't do it.
Alex?
Sure. Well, I want to say I really like the article James Altucher wrote about you and when you did write in Money Media. And I'm curious about your relationship with him and how that influenced what you've been doing. And I guess my other question is, there's a lot of things I want to accomplish, but I also really like watching TV. And what do you say to that? Is there anything that you, in particular, a habit that really serves you well in life that you do every day or maybe every week?
Yeah, so two really good questions. First, James Altucher, who you could search for online, really interesting guy, writer, thinker. And you know, and then I'll get into like personal interest and all that stuff. So James is he's a guy who's made, he says $100 million and lost all of it, world champion chess player. He was launching a company, and I was unemployed in 2007, called Stock Picker. And it was basically like big data company ripping out like what all the big investors, like hedge funds, are investing in, and letting you like invest alongside them in these like kind of funds that were just mere. So if you liked Warren Buffett, like here's everything Warren owns based on his last like disclosure. And I thought it was a really good idea, and I was unemployed and a little antsy, so I got his email. I've never met this guy. I'm like, hey, my name's Mike. I just left golf.com. I really like what you're doing. Can you come and I would love to meet you. And so we met. We met at the Red Flame Diner. This guy's a weird guy. He sits down. I get like, you know, egg whites and blah, blah, blah. He orders a milkshake and French fries at like 7 a.m. I'm like, whoa, that's crazy. No, and bacon. Bacon, milkshake, and French fries. This was before bacon gave you cancer. And he's like, no, I don't want your help. That's cool. Like, I get it. But I kept in touch with him, and like the story is basically how he did everything wrong. He like didn't want to work with me, but he stole all the ideas that I gave him for Stock Picker, ended up selling that, and somehow I let him invest in Buddy Media, where he crushed it off Buddy Media. So he's like, I did everything wrong. And then the most interesting thing about James is, and it's a lesson for all of you, is like use content to your advantage. Like he lives in Cold Spring, New York, but because of his writing and his use of technology, like he's just gotten very networked, and he's on a lot of boards, and he's just done really well for himself, and he has like a great yoga existence. His first marriage didn't work. He married a woman, Claudia, who's a much better spirit than he is. Much more clean and less destructive. Like he was working at HBO doing a show that aired it was about like what happens at 3 a.m. on the streets of New York. And he'd walk around and interview like prostitutes and drug dealers and put it on HBO. So that, now personal interests, what the interesting thing about all these companies is like, people are like, how'd you do it? And you have a marriage and you have like 3 kids and, and I'm a big fan of fish. I don't know if there are any fish. We're close to Vermont, so maybe there's 1 or 2. But I've been to a lot of shows, 170 some shows. I just think being a founder of a startup is a burnout job. And if you really like watching TV, like do a startup about TV. I never watched TV because it wasn't my thing, but if instead of going to fish shows you love TV, maybe that's your thing and you just that's how you decompress. But realize that like startups are bad for your health, they burn you out fast, you lose friends, you lose everything that's good and you gain everything that's bad, basically. So your vices, your lefts, like for me, like I love donuts, like I really love donuts. And like when I'm doing a startup, like I devour donuts. Because I'm going through an airport, even today at LaGuardia, I'm like, I don't travel that much for business anymore, I'm like, fucking donuts. Like they're talking to me. Has anyone here had donuts? They're delicious, if you haven't. And so basically, as Jordy, the stuff that you, like your good habits go away. So if you work out before you do a startup, you stop working out. If you're nice to your parents before you do a startup, you yell at them afterward. And then, take the stuff that really decompresses you and lets you kind of not burn out and do it. So if you want to travel the world, like take 2 weeks off in August and just go travel, right? I think one of the misconceptions about business today is that you have to be always on, working, 20 hours a day, and you judge your like worth and your success by how many hours you work, right? And I just think that, Mark Benioff, I remember the first summer after we sold, he's like, I'm spending the summer in Hawaii. I'm like, is that allowed? Do you talk to your board? Like, do you tell that to Wall Street? And he's like, yeah, like it's what I do. It's how I recharge. And I still do my weekly meeting with my team on Monday. But it's how I think, how I see the future. And for him, like, Tony Robbins, all these people, just friends come to him. So it's not like he's just by himself. But that's what he does. I have other founders who are photographers and who love traveling and take pictures. Music is a big one, for a lot of founders. Poker is another one. There are a lot of founders. I'm not like a math guy. I don't play poker. But you look at like the World Series of Poker, and it's like 3 out of the 10 people at the final table are like startup founders, like David Sachs from Yammer. That's just how they decompress. And so you have to like, whatever you do, whether you're a founder, whether you're an employee, like you have to like, a lot of us, it's easier for us to take care of other people than ourselves, right? And so you have to like invest in yourself and your mental health. It's not a surprise that we're finally reading all these stories about like founder suicides and founder depression. Like there's not one founder who hasn't like had very dark thoughts at some point. Because the idea that we've raised all this money, we have all these employees, like I have this vision where I'm gonna have an easy life and all this money, which never happens, right? Your problems will still be there when you have money. Like all of that gets crushed when you're like running out of money and you're like, I'm gonna have to lay these people off, I'm not gonna make the money, and I'm not gonna do this, I'm not gonna do that. And that's like hard. I mean, every week I'm talking to founders and they don't say it, like I know it, right? But they don't say it, but like you can just see it. Like there's one last week where in my head I'm like, I gotta figure this out because this founder like is gonna hurt himself. And what I said is like take a week off, company will be there, like you need to get to a better place. And, it's enough of that, I guess. It got a little depressing. Sorry about that.
All right, well, we've run out of time. Round of applause for Michael.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.